My Family Thinks I'm Crazy, a podcast where I, your host, try to give you some tips on how you can explain all this weird, wild, crazy conspiracy stuff to the people you love most. Because that's what I've been trying to do for the past 10 years with no success.
I've been telling everybody that our government is shady, but every time I do, my family thinks I'm crazy. The hollow earth, UFOs, aliens invading, fluoride in the water, they swear skies daily. When I talk about these things, they think I'm crazy. There's no escaping anymore the evil that we're facing. Illuminati mind control, they're sacrificing babies. The end of days, but anyways, my family thinks I'm crazy.
What, they don't want to listen to you?
No, they don't want to listen. They don't want to hear it. They're just like, oh, here we go, Mark. Off again with your...
Mark being Mark again.
Yeah. So, that's the thing about podcasts is when you're on the air, and it's like therapy, If I can't talk to my family about this stuff, I'll talk to you, Matt, and all our listeners.
You just tell your whole podcast.
Yeah. So who are we talking about today, Matt?
They think that I'm crazy. They really think that I'm crazy. They really think that I'm crazy. My family thinks that I'm crazy.
The fiat currency Federal Reserve banking magic of yesteryear has taken a bow and gives a nod to its successor, blockchain, cryptographs, and social credit scores. It seems the money-making paper peddlers have been transacted for binary code ones and zeros, traded by the non-binary Cyber Nero, like AI, stretching its cold wires into the electroencephalographic control of Bluetooth earpieces and bullet screens, pulling you deeper into the violent video drone of pop culture. Here to dispel the economic mental paradigm and open up a mystic mind map is Hotep Jesus, social scientist, content creator, and intellectual advocate who joins me for a conversation about history, race, the economic system here in the United States, and most importantly, how to overcome that manipulation. Be sure to check out Hotep's book, The Patriot Report. I'm Mystic Mark. Thank you for tuning into the My Family Thinks I'm Crazy podcast, and enjoy this conversation with Hotep Jesus.
Being a mystic means being able to be of the people, right? And along this journey of becoming conscious, sophomore, junior years, you have that inability to be amongst the people because you're looking at people that are unconscious while you're conscious. And you're like, you don't see what's going on around you. Like, it's kind of like creepy. And then senior year, you understand why they have that state, why they're in that state. And then you're more of a guardian, per se, right? Like a child, doesn't understand something. You don't go, why don't you understand it? You go, oh, wow, it's so cute. You'll grow into it and you'll grow to learn this thing, that you haven't learned yet, right? Whether it's a puzzle or whatever it is, right? You'll grow to learn these things. And so at the senior level, you just see somebody that's like, oh, okay, you'll get there. You'll see one day.
I wanted to start off by talking about something that I think I've heard you talk about it before, but, I'm wondering how much you're willing to talk about, if you want to keep it more present, more relevant in what's been going on.
Anywhere you want to go.
Cool. Because I think it's really, lately, Tartaria, Atlantis, these topics have really exploded. People are talking about all sorts of different ins and outs. Some people say, the Civil War wasn't what we're told it was. People say the colonization era wasn't what we're told it was. I've heard you say something that I've read several different times, and I'd love to expand on it further. Something that I think most Americans would be shocked to learn about. The fact that there were African kingdoms who sailed across the Atlantic Ocean, the Pacific Ocean, way before Columbus, way before even the Vikings, and settled in South America and North America. You know, I think that's a part of our human history that's extremely overlooked and even purposely obscured, and I'm hoping we can get into that.
Well, why did you choose that as something to be of concern?
Well, I am interested in history, and I think that that's something that is often played with by the historians to give people a false impression of their history. I think heritage is extremely important, and I think knowing your roots are extremely important. So.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I would concur. Yeah. I mean, it's, for a guy like myself in the circles I run in, that information is like basic, and I think my years of putting brain work to that, the causation, like why, right? Like the why for that question, I don't think is as important as the solution to the problem. So
Okay.
I apply my brain to the solution of the problem, right? Instead of saying, oh, why didn't they, teach this history? It's like, all right, let's just teach the history.
Right.
Right. And that's more of the approach I take. So, and then it's like, in the grand scheme of things, I think there is some psychological issues that a young man or a young child may face when your history is not told to you. But outside of that, I think there's a lot of work to be done to establish dominance in more important areas like economics.
So ultimately, it's important, you agree, to know your history, but right now, that's not going to garner the solutions that are most important, right?
It's important, but, I'd rather apply our brains to currency, apply our brains to economics. What do we produce and what's the GDP, what's the GMP? Let's get into those conversations, and then we can talk about history and all that stuff later. Like history should be complementary to these subject matters.
Well,
I
ask because
the history has to be some sort of desire, and it's more of a culture thing, right? Like what culture, because there's a culture that is created that is passed down from, parents to children, et cetera, et cetera. But, yeah, no, usually people's history is passed down from generation to generation. So it's like, it's really not up to somebody else to teach your history. Like it's your job to teach your history. So going by somebody else's version of history is just wrong anyway, because they're going to see it from their lens. You want somebody to tell the story that sees it from your lens. And so I when people complain and say, hey, why don't they teach your history? It's just like, well, it's not their job to teach the history. It's your job to teach yourself and your own history.
I would agree.
And I would never fault somebody for saying, hey, you don't know your family tree. It's just like, why are you doing that? Isn't that my problem? So, it's on me to go and search my family tree, unless I contracted it out to you. Like, hey, go search my family tree. Here's some information, right? Then it's a different story. That's what we're doing with the private market, and that's all beautiful. But, other than that, it's like, why am I expecting somebody else to teach me my history? That just doesn't even make sense. Like, I would not expect an Italian person to be like, Hotep Jesus, you didn't teach me my history. And it's like, yo, you're Italian. You know your history.
Very fair point. Yeah, and I asked because I think your perspective is very different. You made the comment that this is kind of like, white belt stuff to me and my community. Well, for the folks listening to this audience, maybe this is just my perception, but I feel like we're getting half of the perspective, right? We're only getting...
Yeah, everybody gets robbed when you tell a part of history. Absolutely. Yeah, white people lose out. Black people lose out. Everybody in the world loses out when you don't tell history. Absolutely. I mean, if you told history properly, I think the entire energy industry would be quite different. Schooling was different. Energy wouldn't be an expense. It would be more like, yeah, I hooked up a battery to my house, right? Like think about the fact that you can't power your own home, right? Like you'd have to call somebody to tell you, hey, we'll come by with the truck. But in the meantime, you're asked out. But if you're somebody with like HVAC skills, and then you're like, okay, here's what's wrong with the boiler, you just get the thing going again, right? So it's these skills, like these what they call blue collar jobs. Like, I'm like, no, what do you mean? Like baseline human responsibilities, right? Like baseline human responsibilities are, you should know how to like fix something around the house, right?
Well, yeah,
You
and
should
it
know how to
seems
use
like
a
they've
screwdriver and
compartmentalized people to the point where those things are separate, where they once were sort of all encompassing. Like home was kept under a certain.
Well, it's the prioritization of what's taught, right? So when we look at Booker T. Washington, yeah, he had the Tuskegee Institute, for Black students to go get that degree, but his philosophy was you learned a blue collar, what we would call a trade, right? You would learn a trade first, right? We're gonna learn how to fix cars, planes. What is it? What are you gonna do? And I think that's baseline for all young men, and it provides stability, right? Because if anything goes wrong with your little corporate gig, at least you could run out there and change some oil or replace a catalytic converter or something, right? Thank you. So yeah, they rob your responsibility from you, and Ted Kaczynski talks about that in his Industrialization Manifesto. Wonderful document, but the less we do for ourselves, the more unhappy we become.
Right.
And I think that is like one of the psyops. Obviously, liberals trying to help Black people, and it's like, no, you're stripping them literally of their happiness by trying to, do everything for them and solve all their problems. Like, no, we have to solve our own problems.
Right. And, as 27 years old, growing up in the state that I grew up in, Connecticut, definitely, wasn't handed a silver spoon, but I was more fortunate than your average person in the United States. And I started to be raised in that exact mindset. I started to notice the school system, the media, giving me a certain narrative of, this less fortunate member of our society who needed my sympathy. And what I realized over time, and this isn't giving myself a pat on the back just because you're here, but what I realized is I was insulting the people that were my friends. I had friends that were Black, Asian, Hispanic, and I was insulting them by having this sort of prejudice in my head of sympathy, almost like a prejudice to sympathize with them, as if they didn't have an equal chance to do what I did.
That's good. That means you're human, and that's
Thank
beautiful. You should not feel guilty for having sympathy for people. I would never say that.
Well, and I didn't mean to raise that assumption. I just wanted to express how commonplace this mentality is, especially in certain parts of the country, and then how that got basically reversed by the blue collar counterparts I was meeting, who were kind of just like reminding me, no, we're all in this, we're all facing this. It's much more complicated than they versus them. And I think often what happens is behavior and experience get conflated. People see the way other people are acting and conflate that with experience when it's just behavior.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
I mean, it just comes down to prioritization. What are you prioritizing in your society? For example, I was watching a video today my friend sent me. There's this dude, and he basically says something, and he's got to tell him how he feels about it. Rapid round style. So he asked him about Trump. Or was it something else he asked him about? Hey, I'm gonna pull it up. I'm gonna play it for you right now. Hold on. It was very interesting what this gentleman had to say. I'm gonna play it live right now.
Please do.
Hold on. He had some interesting answers. He talked about Trump. Yeah, man. He had some interesting responses to things. Here it goes right here.
RBG was pretty good script. She changed the world. Mitch McConnell.
I don't agree with almost anything. Much smarter than people
Floyd Abrams.
don't know him.
Rudy Giuliani.
A destructive person.
Donald Trump.
Danger, real danger to the country, past and present.
Today, the greatest threat to free speech is
The public not supporting it.
Right there.
made it when.
He nailed that. The greatest threat to free speech is the public not supporting it.
Right. And
He nailed it.
And I heard you say something recently. Compliance, trust, and participation are your three biggest problems with the average person because, you know, they are usually not even informed on how important free speech really is. And it's usually because they're participating, trusting, and complying with a system that absolutely does not have their best interests in mind, or even any of their interest in mind in most cases.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Again, it comes back to the same thing. Why do you depend on others for you to have your best interest?
Mm.
It's counterproductive.
Right.
It's counterintuitive. Again, you're reaching outside of self. The moment you reach outside of self, you create unhappiness. For example, there was a girl who said she was going to quit her OnlyFans. But she finally got her the money and she still felt empty. Like they always say, money can't buy happiness. No, it can raise you up the Maslow's hierarchy of needs and get you to the point where, okay, I'm comfortable, but it can't get you happiness. Happiness comes through creation, right? Creating something that's good, right? And then you'll find happiness. But she was saying how she was going to leave the OnlyFans industry. Why? Why would she want to do that and make us all that money?
Maybe she felt like she was degrading herself. Maybe she felt like she didn't want to expose herself that way.
Because everything she wanted was outside of herself.
Right.
Everything she wanted was outside of herself. She couldn't find happiness within. If you can't find happiness within, you'll be without happiness.
Right.
You'll be without. If you can't find it within, you will be without. You have to look inward.
Right.
You look inward, and then that sprouts. And then you begin to affect the world. Like, what do they say? If you want to make the world a better place, start with yourself. It's absolutely right. It'll start resonating and emanating from your being, and it's contagious. You can change the room, and by changing the room, you could change history. You could change the future. Right? You know, you walk into a deli, get your morning sandwich. Somebody walks through the door. A smile could completely change the trajectory of New York City. That person, God forbid, you had a bad altercation. They go outside, they crash, and then chain of events. Final Destination style. It's crazy what could happen. So simply by being the best version of yourself, think about what you can do positive in the timelines you are now creating in this matrix. We have to create positive timelines and just let the good energy, the God energy, just permeate to the point we don't feel the negative.
Right.
The negative becomes when we don't feel the happiness. It's never the extreme lows. It's just like the stock market. You can have higher lows or you can have lower lows. What's the stock doing? I mean, if it's going up and coming back down, going up and coming back down. But what are those low points on the chart? If they're consistently going up, hey, I'll take these lows. But if you're constantly getting lower and lower and lower and lower, and that's what we're starting to see with our society. So, you know, it's no good. You got to sell. It's time to sell. Actually, no, it's time to buy. We're talking about stock market style. But there's something wrong there, some sort of panic, and it's time for a reversal. But yeah, you know, the girl had to quit OnlyFans because she was never taught how to find happiness within. Everybody's looking outside of themselves, and it's just not out there. You know, no matter what community you are, the best thing you could do for that community is look inward at that community and say, what do we value? Okay, there's these things going on in the world. There's these movements and there's Antifa and all this stuff going on in the world. But where's your Antifa? Where's your organization? How are you? First of all, you're complaining that the people you've elected these people in Senate, in the House, you've elected them, so you're responsible for these people, right? And you're complaining about these people, but you elected them. Where's your organization to organize Congress? There are organizations by the multitude in which assist in getting these people elected by compromising the good consciousness of the hoi polloi. These are just facts. But they are organized. So where's your organization? That's what I believe in. Don't complain, organize. We have our organization, Hotep Nation. You can support our organization. You can support another organization. Support the organizations because there are a lot of people organizing. Support the ones that you believe in. Put gas in the cars that are going where you want to go. If you look at an organization and you believe in it and you vetted it very well, you know you're not giving your money to whoever, sure. Support the organizations. But that's the key to this. And then the other key to a lot of this is fight in the courtroom. Knowing your case law, getting passionate attorneys on the case, and start taking some of this legislation off the books. It's not a time to pass new bills, it's a time to repeal bills. That's how I see things, especially when we're talking about on the local level. Like Sonny Johnson was teaching me about all this stuff. She was talking about just the zoning. By the way you zone your town can dictate a lot. Right? So, and I'm not saying I'm any expert, but I played some city before. I know what you can do by zoning, right? Choose your little zones and where certain things and how that affects people. There's a lot of work to be done. There's a lot of work to be done, and so much work to be done that there's no time to complain. The things that happen in this world around us. I always tell people, what distraction do they have for us today? Because no matter what it is, it's a distraction. Ukraine, it's a distraction. Distraction from what? Distraction from yourself. Distraction from your family. Distraction from your community. Just because something happens over here doesn't mean things have to stop here. You can still show sympathy, but that means you stop. And every time there's a new movement or cause that the media has presented before you, you pick up everything and you go to that new cause. It's just like, no. You can acknowledge that and still keep things going. We waste a lot of time getting caught up on frivolous events that are relevant, but not relevant. They're relevant to the masses, but to yourself, they are irrelevant. Unless you're cashing in and making money off this stuff, right? And that's what content creators do, right? We assess this stuff and we become media outlets for the people. And that's like the gift and the curse, because it's like, well, if we don't say it, the people aren't going to get it from CNN. And then we're back at the same place and we're saying, well, they're not telling us the truth. Well, it's on us to get on YouTube and tell the people the truth, right? So you're solving that problem, right? And creating that relationship, right? Between, okay, so they have their media. Let me pick because the people can create a whole new media if they wanted to, just by who they support, right? So if they got together and they say, hey, we want to take this organization. We love their podcast. Let's put $1 million behind them. We love this. And just went down the line and chose just 5 of your best streamers. You put $1 million behind each of them. You could really create your own media based upon your taste, right? And I'm just speaking from let's say it's just one dude who just happens to be sitting on bread, right? He could technically create his own media network just from his taste.
I'll tell you what, I started a media cooperative. I didn't spend any money other than hosting a website, altmediaunited.com, united in free speech.
See, you're organized.
Right.
You've gotten that grouping of individuals that work towards a cause, right? I would call that, which what some people are just so worried about when I use this word, but I would call that natural communism. I, for one, I'm a fan of communism. I really am. For me and my household. But me and a stranger, oh no, hold on now. No, we must practice capitalism. I don't know you. I don't know you. You can only practice communism with family. That's it. And small groups of people. You can't do it. It doesn't work with large groups. It doesn't scale. Communism doesn't scale, right? It doesn't scale. It works for corporate culture. Corporate culture is technically communism. They work the shit out of people in corporate America.
And I've heard you talk about this before, how America is this sort of Marxist nation with capitalist components to it. You know, can we go into that a little further?
Well, yeah, that's simple. We got a central bank.
Right.
When you think of communism, you should think of centralization of power. That's all you got. Just communism equals centralization. Let's stop beating around the bush. Everybody want to talk about all these words and whatnot. Communism and socialism is centralization.
Listen,
that's why the father is so important in the family, right? Because decisions are centralized. When decisions are centralized, you can move nimbly. When things are democratized, things slow down, processes slow down. That's why I love dictatorships, and that's why I love communist ideas, right? However, you can only do it with family and with people that want to be on the same page as you. If people don't want to be on the same page as you, you're forcing them to be on the same page as you. Okay, now we're dealing with fascism. You see what I'm saying?
Right.
Communism is okay. If you volunteer, you want to be a part of this, this is where we going. This is how we build it. And you centralize the power, and you can get there as long as the people in charge know what they're doing, as long as they're competent. You can get to where you want to go, right? But it's centralization. That's why that's why they want to take the father out of the house, right? Because they need democratized decision-making, right? So mother is just making decision makers with the children, and children have a say so, and then the government has a say so, and then now her girlfriend's got a say so. So they democratize the decision making. But had you centralized it within the father, yeah, we discuss it, but dad is the one that finally makes the final decision. He's the one that signs off. Okay, this is the decision. It's not that the father is strong. It's just that the father is usually the more decisive one, and the decision must be made so we can go. It is better to hurry. You have to hurry up and fail. Most people, because your failure is inevitable. If you're not failing, you're not trying. So most people, what they try to do is they try to make the product perfect, and they take so long to make a perfect product that they put the perfect product out, and they find out the product's not perfect. And now they're like, oh my God, what I do wrong? It's like, you did nothing wrong. You cannot create perfect. You always reiterate on said product and make it better and better. So put it out, hurry up and see what's wrong with it, and then fix the things that really matter, because you're really hypothesizing.
Yes.
No, put it out in the world and let's work through it.
That's what I tell people who hit me up and say, I want to start a podcast. Record it, put it out, and listen to what people tell, because that feedback that you get from those people that comment on your first few videos, that's your ride or die. Those are the people that are going to stick with you for 100 episodes if you keep this up. So yes, absolutely. I am 100% with that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You just have to connect with, you have to have a good judge of character. You have to have good character, and then work with other people of the same kind.
Right.
You build a beautiful world with character.
Right.
Sometimes people walk into good relationships with bad character. Great relationship, bad characters. But the characters had their act together. Things could have gone smoothly and everybody could have made money. I've been in situations like that myself. I'm thinking one as I'm speaking about. It's very odd. It's very odd. But again, you cannot allow yourself to be distracted by these things. You have to go with the flow, like as they say. You know, sometimes we spend so much time trying to change one thing that there's this other thing that's like demanding our attention that we're ignoring, that is probably way more fruitful, and drown this other thing out. We have to allow God to present us our opportunities and pursue them relentlessly, and not try to be so up here.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely. And something we talk about on this show often is how the conspiracy, whichever one it is, whether it's a grand conspiracy or it's a whole litany of small conspiracies, there is an aspect of society that is working to separate you from that higher version of yourself, the best version that you can be. There is a operative condition, whatever it may be, whether it was set up on purpose or not. Maybe it's there for, the sake of whipping us into shape sometimes. But I'm wondering, what exactly is that here in the United States?
It's a test. That's all it is. Threats are tests.
Right.
He passes test.
Right.
Again, it comes back to yourself. What can you do? You can't allow the threats, taking so much time to analyze the threats, because a lot of the threats aren't threats. They're only threats because we say they are.
Right.
Right. They can try to zap me with their information. That don't mean they'll be successful. They could try to trap me and keep me from myself. But that's not their decision. That's a my decision. They don't dictate that. I have to grant them access to my consciousness. And if nobody has taught you how to put up a barrier in your consciousness, well, it'll be intercepted.
Right.
It'll be compromised. So yeah, these threats exist.
Well,
you have to grant them access. You have to, you'd have to be naive in many cases as well.
Well, I think that's exactly what school's been designed to do, is to not give us a sense of complete or wholeness in our own intellectuality. We need to go outside of our mind to find answers. We need to go outside of our own authority to feel like we're doing the right thing. I think that leaves people in a position where they're going to democratize their decision making rather than be more authoritative about it, or be more, active and able to make the right choice. They supersede that decision-making process by, setting the table as it's been set. And I know you recently wrote a lot about that in the Patriot Report, talking about how the United States government was basically hand in hand with the central banks from the beginning. Can we talk about how that sort of...
Robert Morris, that was George Washington. When George Washington needed money, he said, yo, go call for Robert Morris. Yeah, there's always going to be a financier around. The crowns of Europe, William of Orange, etc. There's always going to be, I think, Brandenburg. There's always going to be a financier around, a banker, a trader, a merchant, the money men. The people surrounding the currency dictate everything. The currency is a medium of exchange. You become the middleman when you control the money.
Right.
There is an intellectual aptitude an individual must have to deal with money. Many of the kings of Europe, some of them, were illiterate, and certainly not financially literate, just wasteful with money. Many kingdoms you can go through that was wasteful, Rome, wasteful with money, not being financially literate. At some point couldn't even, because of their expansion, couldn't support their army, couldn't feed their own army, right? So this creates a need for somebody who is responsible and is financially literate. But if you're not financially literate, the guy who is can dupe you out your money. Right? So that's why you need to be financially literate, so you can do the checks and balances on your guy, right? If you can't do that, then, well, you have to trust him. You have to have ultimate trust. And if this is not a trustworthy person, bad things can happen. But if it's a trustworthy person, then good things can happen, right? But again, we don't live in a perfect world. So again, I say, if your money in your country is a little funky, maybe you weren't financially literate. In fact, that is the argument that Alexander Hamilton made when he was advocating for a central bank. He said, the people don't know how to manage their money. They need somebody to manage it for them. They're not capable of this, is to paraphrase him, right? And in a way, he's right. However, that doesn't mean it's your job to provide the solution. It's up to the people to figure out, again, hurry up and fail.
Right.
If you don't allow people to fail, you take away their ability to learn. And that is another part of this. They don't want you to fail, because if you fail, you will learn. And then I would render them obsolete and unnecessary.
Indeed. Yeah. And, I heard you also say that this all started, at least our current economic system in the, particular flavor that it operates, started with a man named John Law, who I'm reading here. He was the first person to issue credits on this land, gold, silver, right, in the way that they do now in the West. And I think you're absolutely right when you talk about Hamilton saying, well, people, they're not going to be able to figure it themselves, but we ought to be able to. We ought to, rather than just doing it for us, why not educate us to be able to do it?
John Law was running the Mississippi Company. He was part of the reason for the Louisiana Purchase. That land was invested in swampland. It turned out to be a failed project because, well, Louisiana in that area was swampland. Can't do much with it, right? But what he was doing was he was issuing more credits. Then there was resources to back it up. And many of the speculators, you had what they said, pauper the rich. And then when it all came down, the rich were now paupers again. But he was responsible for inflating the currency, not having a one-to-one reserve and speculating. And I believe he even opened up another dummy company. Then he devalued the currency. Then there was a bank run. Then he was like, he shut the bank, right? Like they do today. Same thing they do today. When people go to the bank, you go to, like when the GME, AMC stuff happened, right? In the stock market, then they just cut it off. Right? So like, stuff like that. So the same thing happening then is happening now. That's why I really want to just like illustrate for people, like the same thing they were doing then is the same thing they're doing now. Nothing new underneath the sun. But yeah, the concept of the central bank is not new. People even talk about the Federal Reserve, and to me, like the most important events in history, at least from a financial level, was definitely the Bretton Woods Agreement. And not the Federal Reserve. In fact, the Federal Reserve didn't get its power until 1980, to be honest with you, with the Monetary Control Act. And that's when you start getting the AML, the anti-money money laundering laws and whatnot. But the Fed didn't really get its power until 1980 under the Monetary Control Act. Like, okay, all monetary control is the Fed. Like that was like the final nail in the coffin. Like you still had hope up until like 1980. You know what I mean? That's why I say like that's not the big deal. The big deal was the highway robbery that became the Bretton Woods Agreement under the Keynesian economics and putting the United States as a world reserve currency and allowing other nations to inflate their currency based upon the labor of the Americans. Like I thought that was like a crazy ass event to me. And then later banning gold. But people talk about 1933 and the banning of gold. And it's just like, the Bretton Woods Agreement was way more serious. They basically sold the labor of the entire nation for cheap, man, and created like massive amounts of debt. In fact, that's when hyperinflation set in 1971, the dissolving of the Bretton Woods Agreement. If you go look at the chart, it's just crazy. Just type in 1971 inflation, you'll see the chart pop right up. But that was, people talk about hyperinflation and damn, like we already experienced hyperinflation 1971. Go look it up, people. Like don't let them fool you into thinking that we haven't experienced hyperinflation. So people are like, oh, we're going to experience hyperinflation. Well, we already did that, bro. We missed that train. And that's what I said. Like, people are naming like certain dates. And I'm like, nah, 1971. What's another significant one? Oh, the Bolshevik Revolution. The Bolshevik Revolution is, oh man, like that's the real turn of the century, I guess, in a way. Man, and it's funny because today, like we look at Russia and it's just like, Russia's still like, oh, the bad guys, right? It's just like, they've been chipping away at Russia for so long, right? They assassinated or allegedly assassinated the Tsar and the family, right? And apparently the son was still alive thereafter. I think his name was Nicholas or something like that, the one with the hemophilia. And, it's just because they've already conquered the rest of Europe, right? They set up the central banks all across the major five: Austria, Germany, England, France. Which one am I missing? Italy. So yeah, it's Russia's like that last piece, right? And interesting enough, like when we talk about the Civil War, it's like you can't talk about the Civil War without mentioning Russia. Russia was a major ally to the North. the North was surrounded. The French, British, and the South were the enemies. They were surrounded, right? So it's the Russians who basically helped us with the Navy and said, nah, we're going to make sure that international laws of war are abided by. You're not going to block off. But these people need resources. They need resources. So they made sure that the British weren't able to like set up blockades on imports, et cetera, et cetera. So the North won the war, right? In fact, the real reason why slavery was abolished is because of Russia. Russia had just basically abolished slavery and moved to, I guess, serfdom or whatever you would call it. But it was a gesture to Russia to say, hey, look, we're on the same page as you guys. Help us out. And that's why we have Alaska as a territory. It was part of the deal. It was part of the repayment process, right? They were like, look, take this Alaska off our hands, and we had to buy it. We bought Alaska back from them. You know what I mean? So that's how that whole situation went about. But I wrote the book. I was very curious because my intuition told me there was something not right with the history of money. So I went and spent a couple of years, just digging up information and, trying to figure out a good way to present it to people in a way that they would get it. I try to stick to more of the hardcore facts, congressional record, primary sources, quotes directly from the primary sources. Not like, what I got from Spouse's book, but no, here's what the individual who lived at that lifetime and was in this situation said, right? On both sides, right? Like, like if we're talking about Edward Mandell House, what are some of what were the words in some of the cables he was sending to Woodrow Wilson, right? Like, let's deal with that. And let's not deal with like what they say conspiracy theory. Like, no, this is what he said. Like, don't tell me that's not what he said. What did Secretary William Jennings Bryan say? What did Robert Lansing say? Right? Robert Lansing was the secretary over there. What did he have to say? Like, let's look at these things. Even when we look at legislation, you're looking at Supreme Court Justice Marshall and what he's, his words on Maryland versus McCullough, right? This is the type of information I want to get out to people. Something that nobody could refute because this happened and you cannot deny that. And I want to present it in a way that was pretty much in chronological order, right? Like we start in Europe. What is that? 17th century, 16th century. And then we move on into America. But we cover, all the banks, right? We cover the Bank of North America, which is the first bank. Then you got the first bank. Then you got the second bank. And then we finally just defeated the second bank, right? They tried another time, failed. And then that's when we got the Federal Reserve years later, 1913. You know what I'm saying? And then the IRS and then the income tax and all that stuff started coming down the pike. So all that stuff was, not cool at all. But yeah, I just think that, we live in a world where, like we started this conversation off, talking about like race and, history and all of that. And I'm like, yeah, those are great conversations. But the reason why we're in this mess is because we don't understand money. When you allow somebody to control your economics and your means of economics, you basically that's your daddy now. That's your daddy now.
Right. It's funny you say that because Ross Ben, someone who I've met, someone who I really dig his work. He talked about how we're moving from the nanny state to the daddy state and how the government is taking on this new role. And wow, yeah, I am 100% in agreement. And it's wild to see how at the same time they've, really warped our ability to understand money. They've given us this idolization of money, or at least just being rich, not wealthy, but rich has become idolized. But seems like the road to riches is not well kept. There's no road signs to lead you down the right way.
Right. No, absolutely. It's not going to be your mama got to give you those. Your daddy got to give you those. Your brother, your sister, somebody close to you. But, unless you run into one of those benevolent strangers, right, who put you on a game, as we would say. But again, right, coming back to, people complain about the Fed. And it's like the same people complain about the Fed are resistant to Bitcoin. It's just like those two ideas are diametrically opposed. You got to do better than that. Right.
Yeah, and it is sad to see that there is this. Go ahead.
And even Williams Jennings Williams Jennings Bryan. He was Secretary of Treasury. Even he capitulated and said, actually, no, it wasn't the Secretary. I'm sorry. It wasn't Treasury. Even he said, like, look, they're using a whole bunch of terms that I do not understand. Right? Like, it's just way too complicated. And that's what they did. They took something that could be simple. Thomas Sowell breaks it down into a very simple language, but they brought things that could be so simple and made them complicated just to confuse people, right? And after you sit down and break, like I was on the train one day with a hedge fund kid, and he was telling me about how he worked at the hedge fund. So I was like, explain to me what he does, right? So he spent 5-10 minutes, maybe, I forget, explaining to me what he does. So I said, after he was done, I was like, so you move money around? He was like, yeah. Right? That's what you're doing. You're moving money around, right? And we don't explain it to people like that, right? We add all these intricate terms and labels to things and transactions. This type, like, for example, like stock in a company is also called a security, right? And it's just like all these terms that mean the same thing. So it's like you have to go to college, but like, you'd have to study up, right? Like to understand.
It's not user friendly.
It's not user friendly at all, right? And it's made like that on purpose, right? Like, because that's how you turn it into an industry. You gotta gate it. You gate it with intellect. You intellectually gate it. And that's why sometimes I tell people, I'm like, yo, the only reason why they can run game on is because they're smarter than us. All right.
Well, and it is exciting to see the amount of people listening to podcasts, because I remember when I was just delivering packages, learning this stuff through podcasting, I would sort of gravitate towards the conspiracy ones, not because I'm, totally slanted that way. I am, but because that's where the information seems to be unfettered, unboxed, it was
contrary to what you were used to.
Right, and it's not all in one vein, there's so many varieties of opinions. So it's kind of, lately seeing crypto being either encouraged to the point where you're like, okay, this guy's like a salesman, or just totally, this is the worst thing to happen. There seems to be two sides. It's very divisive right now, at least in this small community, the one that I'm a part of with conspiracy culture, we'll call it. Crypto has divided people. It doesn't seem like it's going to be that user-friendly alternative to traditional currency.
The community is not very welcoming. It's very annoying, actually.
Yeah.
The crypto community
makes it hard for someone like me to understand or know who to ask the right questions to. So
yeah, because you're like, hey, I think I'm gonna buy Bitcoin today, right? And then it's like, what's Bitcoin? You better use this Bitcoin. If you don't use Bitcoin, you're an asshole. It's like, wait, what? There's more than one Bitcoin. Right? It can be very, very hard for a new person to introduce themselves to the community, because the community is so tribal. I got this coin and this coin and this coin does this and that coin does that. And it's like, all right, cool. Everybody relax. Calm down. It's good. We have diversification of currency. I love it. But, we got noobs here and you're scaring them away. It's like, you're at a hotel party, right? And the girls show up and the homies like, rush up to them like, oh my God, you're so pretty. Da, da, da. It's like, oh, you're going to scare the girls away. Like, relax, like, calm down, like, act normal, right? And that's what happens. Everybody's so thirsty to like sell these people on, their religion, that the person's like, I don't even know if I want to be a part of this anymore. Or maybe I'll just keep it private. So you don't even know, who supports what. So now we got to, which is good. Now you got to go based upon hash rate. All right. What's the hash rate on some of these tokens, and then who's really, put your money where your mouth is, per se.
Right. Now, what tips could you offer someone like me who is very new to it? I've invested in Ethereum only because I'm on Rockfin, and it's pretty inherent. When you're on Rockfin, you have to use Ethereum to convert your Ray. But other than that, I've only ventured to invest in like Shiba and Bitcoin,
Yeah, well, again, the Bitcoin BTC community is built It's king. Placing your money there first is probably your best bet. It's just being agnostic, not taking sides. It's your best bet. It's king. All right. We need to stop beating around the bush and stop acting like that's not the gorilla in the room, but that's the gorilla in the room until somebody can dethrone him. You know, it is what it is. But Bitcoin has a huge head start. And yeah, you know, so I would use something like Coinbits to dollar cost average in Bitcoin. Like just start, you know, allowing, you know, the system to just make buys for you, right? Like I don't think about it. The system makes a buy for me, you know. Coinbase just makes the buys for me, and I get a receipt every Monday or Tuesday or whatever it is. You know what I mean? And it tells me here, here's how much Bitcoin you got, and I put the same amount in every week, right? And it's just like that. So I'm continually stacking sats. So maybe a year from now, I go in and I check my account. Let's see, okay, you know, what's this doing, right? And if I want, I can extract it, send it to a wallet, and I can hold on to it, or the exchange, or their company can hold on to it. You know, it's whatever. But you know, it's about getting in a habit. So now, once you have accrued some Bitcoin, it's like, okay, you know, hopefully over that year you've been educating yourself little by little. So now you can use that Bitcoin and start participating in the community, like start making purchases and transactions and investments. Like invest in projects with your Bitcoin. You know, situations like that. It's really about using the currency. It's not so much about like trying to invest in it, as opposed as it is. It's really what it is. It's a hedge against the dollar. Let's just be honest. It's a hedge against the dollar. It's like, you want to hold on to the dollar, or you trust the dollar more than Bitcoin? I don't know. I just don't trust the dollar, you know, more than Bitcoin. And I think that's really what it comes down to. And if people trust the dollar more than Bitcoin, then hey, you know, more power to you. I think if you read the Patriot Report, you probably wouldn't.
Right. And I think that's why there is so much fear mongering in this area. I had a great conversation with a gentleman by the name of Nandi Martin. Shout out to him down in Haiti. And he was kind enough to send me some little Haiti coin, because one of his projects that he was kicking off was getting this community in Florida using this cryptocurrency. And I think, you know, whether or not that ended up working out for him, it's promising to see things like that happening, where communities are able to take advantage of this new currency to, decentralize themselves away from this less trustworthy system and maybe start their own. What are your thoughts on that? Like small communities using the crypto space?
Yeah, absolutely. That's what it's for. It's freedom of choice. You know, just like you have a choice of what you want to wear, you have choice of the currency you'd like to use. I think that's a valuable choice people need to have. I don't think we should be stuck to using one type of money. We should be accustomed to trading different currencies. I think we've gotten away from that because, again, we've allowed financial institutions or financial experts to manage our money, to hold our money, right? We've never had that responsibility. Well, what are they doing with our money while they hold it, right? Because if you start a bank, right, and 10 of us put money in that bank, right? Let's say we put, you know, $1 billion each. So this bank's got 10. They are not going to make loans off of that 10 billion. They're going to leverage that billion to create debt, and then flip that new money. So what does that mean for us? That means we could have taken that money, put it somewhere, and had it multiply for us. But instead, they took our money and they made it multiply. And so that's another part of crypto where you have staking, right? You could just stake your money on the token, right? And make an APY on it. Right? I make an APY on Ethereum, right? But you should be paid. Your money should be paying you. You know, if your money's not paying you, then you're not thinking about money correctly.
Right.
You know, that's why I try not to hold on to dollars. You know, I put them in the stock market or something, right? Put it in something that at least I know it. Even if it don't go down, it sustains and has slow growth over time. That's way better than dealing with inflation. Right? The dollar is slowly just, you know what I mean? So it's just common sense to not hold on to dollars. And I think that's why the rich are rich, because they understand the concept of debt.
Right. Right. And this is kind of taking us to a subject that I hope we can talk about, which is classism versus racism, and how the narrative gets switched to racism when I think really classism is the major issue in a lot of ways behind most of the problems we have in society. It's one group of individuals of a different group.
What you have is potent racism and inept racism, or impotent racism. So potent racism would be apartheid, South Africa minimum wage laws. Potent racism would be South Carolina minimum wage laws, right? And basically saying, hey, we're going to install these minimum wage laws so that Black people can't compete on price, right? This is where minimum wage laws pretty much get their history from. Like, it's born out of racism, right? Now, somebody, calling you the N-word flying down the street, that's impotent racism. You're not really harming me, right? Like, if Joe Rogan says the N-word in the media, like, that's not bothering me. I really don't care, right? I like Joe Rogan. He's cool, right? But, the people would focus on impotent racism and not straight up racism. Like, LBJ's entire civil rights bill for us was like the destruction of the Black community, right? His civil rights and all that help and aid. Yeah, the aid is just the destruction. Again, coming back to necessity, and coming back to independence, how much independence you have, you depend on somebody else, you're just giving them an option to screw you. It just comes back to the same point every single time.
Right. Right. And it feels like the weapons that have been used against the Black community by this establishment, white or what have you, those same weapons can work against any group of people. It doesn't matter.
Well, they are used against all
Right.
types of groups of people.
Exactly.
Absolutely. If you look at the Ludlow massacre, man, they murdered a whole bunch of white folks, man. White folks, kids, women. With the National Guard's help.
Right.
Pinkertons and the National Guard. Ludlow massacre, I believe that's in Colorado somewhere.
Right.
There's a lot of crimes against humanity that's been done by the state. And that's my point. It's like, can you say racism doesn't exist? Like, no, it definitely exists, right? Can you say that Black people are the only people who getting it bad in America? No, you can't say that. I think we're all getting shafted. We're getting shafted as soon as we touch this money. As soon as we have to transact in this money and we dealing with a financial institution, it's like, oh, wait, hold on, what's going on? I want to send my friend, $20,000. Why do I have to fill out this paperwork and answer these questions? Oh, you're going to tell me no? Dude, why are you holding my money? Like, it's my money. Just send it to him, please. Thank you.
Right.
Like, is there a fee? What's the fee? Just tell me the fee. Like, how much is it going to cost to send him the money? So it's like, you know what? Forget all this. I'm going to just do it in Bitcoin because nobody can tell me no with Bitcoin.
Right.
Hey, see how we just come back to like these options, these freedom of options. And I don't have to answer anybody. If I want to send you $20,000 worth of Bitcoin, I'm going to send you $20,000 worth of Bitcoin. And nobody can stop me. It'll be there in 10, 15 minutes.
Thank you.
Well, that's what we could do. But and that's why I say, like, we all screwed from the very beginning. That's why I wanted people to understand. Like, we all screwed from the very beginning. So now where do we go from here?
Right. Well, and that's exactly where I hope we can take this conversation. But I want to go maybe a little bit into the past and ask you when this started for you. I know there's the FAQ. Folks who want to learn more, they can go on hotepnation.com. They can go to your website, briansharp.co. But between me and you, like, where did this start for you? Because this shows a lot about, family and what makes us, grow past this sort of like need to fit in, because my family's thought I was crazy for going against the grain, thinking differently, thinking in a way that wasn't accepted by the mainstream media. But I've heard, your father was a very special individual. It's not common to hear that you were raised by a mystic, right? And tell us a little bit about that and like the beginnings of this journey for you, because I think you're on a very inspiring journey and your mission to raise the intelligence of the average person. I think that's very noble.
There's this game called Wordle that everybody plays.
Mm.
So ordinarily, I don't I don't like to just rush and do what everybody does. But my family, my mom and my dad, they play this. They're older, so they play. They like to play word games. So we play this as a family, right? And my father's kicking our ass. And really, what it comes down to is he's picking really good first words, right? If you can get a couple of letters in that first words, well, all right, it's like when you get to like the fourth word and it's like, damn, like I only got one, and then maybe the other one's not in the right spot. It's just like, oh God. So now it's like, Dad, what's the first word? What first word we using today, right? And then because he always just inspired me to use my intuition. He would say that a lot. Follow your intuition. He would say that a lot. Follow your intuition, follow your intuition, follow your. So when that's in you at a young age, it becomes your philosophy. If I was playing sports, you use your intuition. No matter what I was doing, going for a job interview, you know what you got to do. Like there's certain things you have to do mystically or spiritually within self to fine-tune yourself for events. A lot of it is placebo and self-talk. How do you talk to yourself? Right? Self-talk. I would never tell somebody that spirituality is anything other than placebo. If you can convince yourself of it, you can create it. The mystical part is the fact that it actually becomes creation. That's the mystical part. It's like, oh shit, because I thought it came to be. Right? Because I believed that it came to be. Right? Like I believed in my dream, so I got in the music game. It's dead. New York City, that shit was lit till it wasn't. Right? But you can have anything you want, but you first got to believe it. There's all types of experiments that they've done in the medical industry with placebo and people who get a sugar pill and people who don't, and how they feel. I don't have to run. Everybody knows about that stuff. But yeah, so, my dad just, instilled in me to have certain principles about myself that would just, keep me on the path, as he would say.
Right.
Stay on the path. That's something he would say, stay on the path.
Do you think that naturally led you towards this service towards others, or do you think this is something that is inherent to who you are? Because I agree. I think there's something to that, mystic.
I'm very much like my dad. Like my dad, like he'd give you your shirt off your back if you need it. You know what I mean? Like I've seen him help so many people that he had no business trying to help. You know what I mean? And I get it from him. Like we're just people who like we can't stand to see people suffer. It burns them. It burns him. He can't take it. So I'm very much the same way. Like it burns me to see people suffer. That's just how we're built as individuals. And I think because I have his genetic traits, that's what I got. That's the luck of the draw. God, I'm the fucking guy who cares about people. It just is what it is. But I think the mysticism just kind of helps you deal with that responsibility, right? Help you harness that responsibility, because everything is here on purpose and everything is a test. So whatever responsibilities you were given, those are meant for you. Those will help create you, and you help create in the world. So those natural proclivities are the path. They are actually the bricks to the path. Yeah, man.
Right on. Yeah, I'm with you, man. And I wonder, from this perspective, what do you think of events like what we just saw at the Super Bowl? What do you think of like a president like Joe Biden, like this mystical mindset? I think it's hard to participate in normal society once you've taken that sort of new perspective. You know what I'm saying?
Yes. So yeah, that's probably like sophomore, junior year. Junior year, you start to shed some of that, right? So, being a mystic means being able to be of the people, right? And along this journey of becoming conscious, sophomore, junior years, you have that inability to be amongst the people because you're looking at people that are unconscious while you're conscious, and you're like, you don't see what's going on around you. Like, it's kind of like creepy. And then senior year, you understand why they have that state, why they're in that state. And then you're more of a guardian, per se, right? Like a child, doesn't understand something. You don't go, why don't you understand it? You go, oh, well, it's so cute. You'll grow into it and you'll grow to learn this thing, that you haven't learned yet, right? Whether it's a puzzle or whatever it is, right? You'll grow to learn these things. And so at the senior level, you just see somebody that's like, oh, okay, you'll get there. You'll see one day. And then once you have that perspective, you sort of live with it. So once you understand things, you don't even see people anymore. It's like Neo. He started just seeing the green letters and whatnot, right? Like, that's where I'm at now. I just see green letters. I don't even see people. If I see you awaken and like you're glowing out of this whole matrix, right? But yeah, once you start to understand the program, you can't be mad at the program. It's in the program. It's just like, how are you gonna unlock said program?
Well, and I'm glad you brought up the Matrix metaphor, because last year, actually the year before, we were supposed to have a podcast in Philadelphia. I was there with Sam. We ended up rescheduling it to last year, and you had a great conversation on Tinfoil Hat with Sam. And towards the end, you guys were talking about tech and this like basic. What I got was a strong sense of optimism, and in the message you were sending, which was like, hey, no matter how far they get with the drones, with the surveillance state, we have minds that are equal, that are working on workarounds in the technological realm, right?
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, from that Neo perspective, what are we doing now to fight Mr. Smith? Because it's one thing to recruit other people to see it from our perspective, but how do we fight Mr. Smith?
There's always going to be a dark web.
Right.
We got the web, we got the dark web. There's always going to be an underground. There's always going to be a black market. It just, again, natural laws of economics. If you want to get into mysticism, this is the law of duality, right? Where one side exists, the other side does. This is why the Chinese people got the yin yang symbol, right? It's that natural balance to life. And that's why one side is light and the other side is dark, right? Dark web. So it's just the natural balance of things, right? So we'll have, like, you see it in the movies. Like, you ever watch Altered Carbon?
No.
Oh man, it's a Netflix series.
Okay.
And when I had COVID, I sat down and watched like the whole thing.
All right.
Yeah. But you have, for example, the guns are like electronic, right? Electronically activated and whatnot. It's the future, right? And you got like these different types of chips and cybernetics and transhumanism type thing going on. And you got some created by the government. And you got some created by the dude on the side street, right? Who can hook you up with some good cybernetics. So, or jailbreak your phone. We've been jailbreaking phones for how long, right? So you can use Skynet devices and use them against them in a way,
Right. I've not jailbroken my phone yet, but I have this fabric. It's called Faraday Fabric, and I like line my pockets with it basically, so I'm not getting any EMF radiation on my phone to my body. And I think those sorts of I have a beanie that a past guest sent me that's got that same fabric on the inside, to protect your brain from this kind of thing, but it definitely feels, like a tinfoil hat. It basically, it feels like we're entering into this new world where there are invisible threats. There are possibly,
You don't affect me, yo.
No, let's get into that. I mean, because I think that's another one of these in the same vein as crypto, where they're sending a lot of fear out about this, and maybe it's all for nothing. What are your thoughts on that?
5G don't affect me. The only thing that can affect me is what I say can affect me.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I live to 155.
With that. Right on.
Because I say so.
Right.
These fears, just having the fear of your device is probably more toxic to your body than the actual effects of the device on your body. You fearing the device alone is going to increase your cortisol levels at even a minuscule rate.
That's measurable. Yeah.
That's measurable. It's
and-
a direct effect on your body. Your cortisol levels just went up.
Not to mention you're wasting time that could be used productively with that device to, better your life in myriad of
There's
ways.
many things you can do with that emotional energy.
Mm.
That emotional energy is what you need to manifest things.
Mm.
The universe doesn't speak in language. You don't ask God for anything. You feel what you want, and God creates the circumstances for you to receive. You don't speak to God. There's a billion fucking people on this planet or whatever, and they all speak a different language, right? If we all believe in the same one God, there's only one God, as some people would say. God is multilingual. I mean, sure, because he's the all-knowing, so of course he should be, but it's not how God operates.
Right.
God ain't got time for that. What do you feel? That's what God want to know. I hear what you're saying. What do you feel?
Feeling is universal. Yeah.
Feeling is just, hey, man, it's just like, you all talking, no action. You see what I'm saying? So if you have the vibratory frequency of whatever it is that you want to achieve, it'll naturally manifest because of the law of compensation. What goes up must come down. So the universe will always return whatever frequency you put out. Even if you look at it from a very physical level.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you see that with, relationships. I know you put out a book.
If you want to understand spirituality, you got to study water.
Okay.
The frequency of the wave can be changed by the speed at which you move it. But the top is going to be the same angle as the bottom. That is the frequency. How wide is it, right? If I take my hand and go like this, it's going to be very small frequencies. But if I go real slow, the waves are going to be bigger, right? They're going to expand. Okay, that is a frequency. You have the same thing when you deal with radio. There's a frequency, right? How you feel can be measured in a frequency. I can measure your frequency. Okay? Sometimes we measure it in things like, what's your temperature?
90, yeah, 90 degrees, right?
Right? Whatever that is.
88.
Right. When you are scared, you shiver. You've raised your frequency. The shiver is in the water. Right? Heart start racing. Again, you've raised your frequency. Fear puts you in a very low frequency. It makes things very erratic. You don't want to put, because whatever frequency you have is the ripples you make in the water. Right? The water is the universe and everything around us. It's the matrix. The water is the matrix. How I move my hand is my frequency. Is going to create a frequency. How I feel is the hand, or the hand is expressing as it splashes through the water and creates these waves. My emotions are going to dictate how that water ripples. How you feel as an individual is going to create a frequency, and it's going to ripple through this universe, this matrix. And whatever that is, it's going to come back.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's a fundamental understanding that can change your life. A lot of people, I can remember jobs I'd work where you'd work alongside of these people who were just constant complainers, and maybe I was just sensitive, but I got to the point where I would really just try to block them out, because I realized like they were not helping their situation at all. Maybe they thought if they just bitch and moan and complain about everything that bothered them, that would, relieve the stress, but it really only seemed to compound and compile this stress. And yeah,
You ever seen a lie detector test?
tell us. Yeah, I've seen one, but tell us why, what,
What that needle do like this, right?
right. Okay.
And then they ask you a question, and that motherfucking needle move, don't it?
Mm-hmm.
Right? No matter what the question is, it's gonna have a certain.
Right.
Everybody got a frequency, though.
Yeah.
Got to check your frequency.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, that's why going out in nature, going for drives, even listening to podcasts can be a big reset or a harmonizer for me. What are some things you do in your life to reset and reharmonize? Daily
Work.
practices.
Work on things I love.
Right.
You know, end of my day is spent learning Spanish. And then I go to bed watching some chess games. You know, I'm an avid chess player.
Right.
I should say an avid chess student. So, I mean, I'm more of an individual. I have obsessive behavior where when I do something, I got to be the best at it. Like, I can't start second place, or whoever's in first place is gonna be, you know, they're gonna notice me. I'm like, yo, this dude's on his shit. You know what I mean? So you have to make me in the same conversation with the best, right? It's just so when I do something, I go hard at it. That's just me. That's how I've always been. It didn't help me too much in corporate America because corporate America culture for employees doesn't work like that. Usually people get a job and they're like trying to do the least amount of work, right? Just for the paycheck.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm the moron walking in like ready to like be the number one guy in the building. You know what I'm saying? And it doesn't make you too popular amongst other employees because you come in doing all this work and now everybody's looking at the rest of the team like, you know, how's he putting out all this output and you're not putting out this output and we pay y'all and y'all here longer, you know? It just makes everybody else look suspicious. So usually it doesn't make you popular amongst other workers. But that's just how I'm built, man. You know,
Right.
we're working on something we want to win. It just is what it is. I don't know losing.
Right. Well, and I want to touch on something that maybe is a little bit of an outsider subject for me, but maybe you'll have some more to share, maybe from a more of an inside perspective. A lot of what you're talking about in mysticism, it's something that I've heard through various musicians, you know, specifically rappers. Underground rap was a big part of my early, you know, teenage years, waking me up out of the illusions of the modern world. Groups like the Poor Righteous Teachers, you know, were a big one for me. Army of the Pharaohs later on, Immortal Technique. You know, how much of what you're talking about was in that early hip hop movement? Because I feel like that was co-opted. That like, you know, I am movement and the potential of the human mind.
Yeah, much of it was there. I mean, I got that from my dad, so I didn't need it in hip hop. I used to listen to Jay-Z and Tupac.
Right.
And Biggie. And then I desired more of like the Kanye West type of material that's a little bit more real and not like so retarded, I guess you can say.
Well, and that was for me, like just looking at the, you know, what was popular in 2006, 7, 8, 9 when I was a young kid, you know, that's a lot of what it was, this ignorant music that turned me away and turned me towards the more underground music where they're talking about what's really going on.
Well, that's the beauty of choice, man.
Right.
You know, people talk about, you know, well, this is the music that's popular today. And it's like, well, you couldn't make the other music popular. Again, it's choice, right? Like we choose to make the ignorant stuff popular, but just stop listening to that. Listen to the good stuff.
Right.
You know, like there's always going to be that underground. There's always going to be that. If you got mainstream, it's increasing underground. People go, yeah, that's what they're doing over there, but that's what we're doing over here. And like, you can go there. And a lot of times, artists do well in the underground. Nipsey Hussle did well independently. Nipsey Hussle did very well independently. You know? So you don't always need their help. You don't even need their assistance. You can work side by side. See, the thing is, especially in the music game now, they're not even signing artists anymore. They're making business deals.
Like, if I'm already packing shows out, okay, now they want to sign me because I'm a proven concept, right? They're not investing in anything that's not already a proven concept. That's not already moving and making money, right? Or has the potential to make money because it's already moving. But that's really what it comes down to. They swoop in, for example, that's where Karl Marx was right about the middle class, right? Like, middle class complains about the decisions of the poor, right? Especially when the poor go to vote and they all vote Democrat. So they upset. They're like, oh, why do you guys keep voting? It's just like, well, the government's the only one offering them a solution. The government's the only one helping them. Like, the middle class has the capability to organize and take over the role of the government at any time they wanted to. And then it would render the government obsolete, but you don't take care of the poor, right? You don't give them options. You don't bring them up into your world. You kind of like look at them like there's something wrong with them. And Marx is right about that. The middle class are fucking a bunch of stuck up assholes. Absolutely right. So again, if the middle class got their act together, a lot of these problems wouldn't be able to be exploited, because that's all they do. They exploit problems. Okay, this group needs something. They're not getting it. They're not getting it. Then boom. I'll step in and pretend to give it to them. Right? Then you wonder why they don't vote your way. If you're the guy feeding the poor, who do you think the poor are going to vote for? Whoever you tell them to. Because you're feeding them. Right?
Right.
Okay. Government feeding people. You say what you want. As bad as it may be, as detrimental as the long-term effects may be, they feed people. How many people you fed today?
Right.
Right?
Right.
So because they have a monopoly on aid, they get to dictate a lot of things, man. We gotta help each other, man. We gotta help each other. Gotta help each other. That's one of my motivations for being rich, is just so I can help the poor. I'm like, I could do so much for the poor if I had $1 billion. And I'm not saying give them money. I'm just saying, like, I can create like real programs and institutions. It's really what I'm into. Systems, institutions, cultures, concepts, and ideas. Mm-hmm.
So what's next? What are you working on in 2022? Anything that you want to share with us?
Homeschooling.
In light of what happened over the past 2 years is, yeah, I think a lot of parents should make that choice. Get their kids unmasked and home where people actually care about their well-being. But yeah, tell us more.
You know, homeschooling, you don't even have to be at home. Like, you know, homeschooling pods.
Right.
You can post up anywhere and teach a class, right? So there's pods. You know, check your local districts, etc., and find pods. But, you know, 7 people can go in on a class together and get their children taught. It's not that hard, depending on where you live, of course. Some places it's easier than others, right? But I think as we support the community and grow it out, it'll become easier to do this, right? It'll be like more of the culture, like, yo, I homeschool my kids, and so we're complaining about like what they teach our children. Well, why do we keep sending our children to those institutions? Control your child's education, right?
Right.
So that's what's good about having pods, because it's like you can take somebody. It's even beneficial for the teacher, right? The teacher's probably going to get a 20 to 30% or more increase in salary. Would not even have to work. Like, all right, now I only have 7 students I got to deal with for the year, you know? Especially the high school students. Well, you know, you just took away a whole bunch of classes that the teacher would have to be responsible for. Teacher has less hours, less work, right? She only has to grade 7 tests. And it also means she gets to spend more time with each student. It's the future, man. We had a great talk, bro.
Thank you. Yeah. Hey, man, it was awesome having you here. I wanted to get into a lot more, so we'll definitely have to schedule something again. And tell us where we can follow up with you. Obviously, your website, hotepnation.com, briansharp.co. We got 2 books, 3 books, right?
Follow me on YouTube.
YouTube.
Hotep Jesus on YouTube. Follow me on YouTube.
Cool.
You got to understand me before you dive into my world. And YouTube's the best way. If you go to my Twitter first, you'll be like, what the hell's going on?
Okay.
It's too dynamic.
And we got Sharp Conversations, right? Of the podcast.
Yeah. That's all on my YouTube. Yep.
Cool.
Don't even worry about that. Mm-hmm.
Right on, man.
Thank you, bro.
Yeah, thank you for being here. And listeners, thank you so much for tuning in. Follow up with Brian Sharp, a.k.a. Hotep Jesus. He's doing great work out there. And thank you so much for listening. Have a great moment wherever you are in the now. Peace.
All right. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for being here on the My Family Thinks I'm Crazy podcast. What a great conversation with Hotep Jesus. Could have did without him eating, but, you know, Hotep is a big guest. He's been on Joe Rogan. This is a growing podcast, and I am honored to have him on the show nonetheless. A lot of excellent information in his book, The Patriot Report, discussing the history of the banks. And I think that is just so important to understand, this sort of history of what we take for granted in our society. And obviously, 10 years ago, this conversation might have been a little different, but with the advent of cryptocurrencies, a lot of people have a lot of hope. I'm not going to be the one to hand out the black pills. I too share a lot of hope in cryptocurrency, but you can never be too sure. And I wanted to read a quote that was addressed towards John Law, a man that we discussed in the interview today, an economist who sort of innovated some aspects of the fiat currency system that we all live under. And a political cartoon of his time described him in a sort of goofy photo with, like, kind of looks like he's like sitting on a cloud of hot air, you know? And the text on the side of this political cartoon reads, "The wind is my treasure, cushion, and foundation. Master of the wind, I am master of life, and my wind monopoly becomes straightway the object of idolatry." Very interesting to see that. And see how money today in our modern world is idolized. And it is really like the air, you know? Just seems to slip through your fingers. Speaking of money, help me out, folks. We got a lot of awesome plans for this podcast, and we can't do it without your support. This month, we're doing a 3/22, March 22nd, meetup in New Haven. If you're local to the area, come on down at 2:45 p.m. We're going to meet in front of the Book Trader Cafe and go on a free, fun walking tour of New Haven to be an acupuncture needle and the collective consciousness of New Haven, Connecticut. And along the way, have some fun and expose some of the symbology that you can see right on the buildings. You don't even have to go inside. You could just see it right on the outside of the building. So I'm excited to do that. I know not many of you happen to be in Connecticut, but that's all right. If you're in Massachusetts, Rhode Island, New York, and you want to drive down and have fun, I know a lot of other folks that are going to be there who've already told me, yep, I'm coming. Maybe even some podcasters, maybe even Michael Wan. So come on down, 3/22 this March 22nd at 2:45 p.m. And we're going to try to get to a prime location, which I'm sure you know if you understand the reference, by 3:22 p.m. So go to thehighersidemeetups.com to check that out. Shout out to Greg for allowing us podcasters to use his very, very cool meetup site. I ought to do one for No Agenda too, because I know they have a very similar thing going on there. And yeah, you know, this conversation with Hotep Jesus definitely was shorter than I had liked, but, you know, hopefully he'll come back on the show. Seemed like he had a lot going on that day. That's all right. Some future guests coming out after this one. We've got Keith Corneluck, the host of Modem Mischief, a podcast about hackers in the 21st century, some cyber criminals, pretty wild stuff. Talked about Edward Snowden, talked about Ross Ulbricht, among others, lesser known hackers like the Lizard Squadron and the Soup Nazi. Anyways, here we are, folks, in the outro. It's a Monday episode, so we don't have very much else to say. Be sure to sign up on Patreon to get all of our bonus content. We've got so much stuff there for you to check out. We've got some new reviews, folks reviewing the show. Why don't we go and read some reviews? Open up the mailbag. Let's see. All right, we got some good reviews. 5 stars, great show. What a podcast. Keep getting my mind blown more every day. Thanks for leading such great conversations into the unknown parts of reality. You're welcome, Tyler P. Appreciate you, dude. Next one, quality podcast. Mark is a great host. The conversations are nebulous and diverge from the script that sometimes guests have when answering the same old questions across different shows. Thank you, Lacey. I appreciate that. Lacey's in our Telegram chat. Shout out to all of our friends in the Telegram chat. Join in our Telegram to be a part of the community.
Well, I'll wait here, and when you find out, send me a telegram.
That's right. Send me a Telegram. And if you're a patron, you sign up for the Patreon, you get access to an exclusive patrons-only Telegram where all the fun's going on. And if you like that kind of community, we also do a monthly Zoom meetup. And given that we're having a sort of in-person meetup this month, I think we'll do the Zoom meetup maybe like the week after the last month of March. That way I can fill everybody in on what happened. If you happen to be far and away, I know some really awesome friends of mine who have supported the show for the past few months. They happen to be all over the country. So if you want to join the family, it's not hard. $2 a month is all it takes, and you get access to the early releases of this podcast. You get them a week ahead of time if I can keep a normal work schedule. I got a lot going on, folks. I'm doing podcasts all the time. And speaking of this podcast, we have another review. Love this podcast, 5 stars. I can relate to the last episode. I'm 9 from Tucson. I'm definitely going to contact Clutch. I'm planning on doing a podcast on how I was targeted by the feds in Tucson. Pretty crazy. People do the same stuff. Okay. That didn't really make a lot of sense towards the end there. Could be my fault. Shout out to you, 9. I appreciate 5 stars, and I look forward to hearing that podcast. Send me a link, dude. Send me a link. The best place to send any links is on the Telegram. And before I go, just want to remind everybody that it is the month of Merch Madness. That's right, Merch Madness. Use the promo code MERCH88, MERCH88 on our Teespring store. You can find the link in the description. It's the first link in the description. And we got some badass shirts, okay? If you want to let the world know what kind of conspiracy theories you fuck with, you're going to need one of these shirts. Whether it's Hollow Earth, JFK, the Brotherhoods of the Serpents, who knows? I don't know what you like. So I've got a bunch of shirts, like 70 freaking shirts. If there's not one for you, then hit me up and say, hey, I want checkers on the shirt. Hey, I want plaid. I don't know. Let me know. This is a work in progress. Same thing with the podcast. If you have any guests that you'd like to see on the show, join the Telegram, send me a message. It's not hard. That's it. Great conversation with Hotep Jesus. Not easy to have this sort of race relationship kind of conversation. I think I did it well. Walked a tightrope. Hotep is a really awesome dude. Brilliant thinker, way ahead of his time. And I appreciate him having patience with me and my naivete. And it was good to hear him say that he had a great time too, because I think I'm really polishing my skills here as a podcast host. And if you agree, leave us a nice message on Apple. That's about it for us now, folks. Thank you so much for being here, and enjoy the moment wherever you are in the now.